We are now in an era where mass consumption and essential consumption are on the rise. The transition of the economic structure from a production-oriented society to a consumption-oriented society requires a long period of effort. Most of us earn from the beta of the era, and very few can earn the alpha. I consider myself relatively clear-headed, heavily investing in Chinese consumption, domestic demand, and Chinese brands, mainly focusing on essential and high-frequency needs. Only by understanding the cycle in the most profound way can we make clear judgments about the future.
Many people are actually curious about why you believe a domestic brand still has opportunities in a very mature field.
There is indeed strong insight involved. We indeed aligned with the beta of this era, and of course it was also the best company in China at that time. When we invested in it in 2017, it was already the largest company among China's star brands.
Such companies generally don't lack money, right?
You've seen all of our products.
They don't lack money.
They all don't lack money, so the difficulty in consumption lies here. For the companies you admire, using money as a stepping stone is useless.
So besides money, what exactly do we offer them?
We are all in cycles, but very few people can realize the cycle they are in, and even fewer can accept the changes brought by the cycle. The profession of an investor precisely requires identifying and predicting the fluctuations of cycles. Among many investment fields, consumption has always been considered slow, an easily overlooked track. A track where the path to IPO is full of challenges, and at the same time, a track where once a good project surfaces, it can immediately gain cash flow.
Harvest Capital
is one of the few investment institutions in China that focuses on consumption. Over the past decade, amidst the ups and downs of economic cycles, how has Harvest Capital's founder, Song Xiangqian, adhered to his philosophy of consumption investment? And how does he interpret the easily overlooked everyday life around us?
In the past less than 10 years, we have experienced consumption upgrading, a wave of new consumption, followed by consumption downgrading. Is this a normal phenomenon in terms of the overall development pace of consumption?
I think it's quite normal, but it also reflects some abnormal situations. Firstly, the rapid transition of new consumption from a concept to a reality across various industries in the market over the past decade is very normal. It indicates that in a highly dynamic macroeconomic environment where effective demand is being released, ordinary people need a better life, better products, better services, and more personal experiences. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, moving from physiological and psychological safety towards self-actualization is inevitable. However, suddenly we find that in the past 2 years, while not all new consumption has been wiped out, most of it is struggling to survive. We are now in an era where mass consumption and essential consumption are on the rise. So we are paying the price for the lag in transitioning from the previous economic development structure, as well as the insufficient share of our per capita income in the national economic growth. In fact, consumption is naturally constrained by effective demand and is limited by the marginal propensity to consume. In the future, there will still be consumption upgrades and the continuous emergence of new products and categories, but it probably won't be like it was in the past.
You mentioned the past several times in your previous remarks. We all know that in the past few years, people got used to having a star project, quickly securing financing, seeing valuations double, and then going public, etc. Now, we all say that was in the past. But people have a habit of reminiscing, especially when a cycle changes. We see a lot of discussions about how to return to that high growth. So In your opinion, should we be discussing how to return to that high growth, or should we recognize the current pace?
There was a particularly good term in your question just now, which is cycle. Only by deeply understanding cycles can we make a clear judgment about the future. There are different types of cycles, such as inventory cycles, aggressive cycles, and long cycles like the Kondratiev cycle. Actually, we are within a large long cycle range because the development of productivity levels is lagging. We have not yet seen an improvement in production efficiency driven by new technological revolutions, nor an increase in total factor productivity, so the whole society is searching for direction. Especially our economic structure, transitioning from a focus on real estate and a production-oriented society to a consumption-oriented society, requires a long cycle. It also took Japan 30 years to climb out of such a low-growth environment. For China, it will likely take even longer than Japan. In this kind of realistic environment, of course, we need to take action. So during the cycle, we also hope to effectively manage expectations. Since expectations are the foundation of all economic activities, accepting the state of low investment returns in a low interest rate environment is likely to be a major theme of the future era.
You probably often interact with frontline founders or entrepreneurs. Do you think they are truly prepared in terms of mindset or strategy to face this long cycle?
Personally, I don't think they are. Faced with such a massive transformation, the preparation is inadequate because we are accustomed to the past pace and environment of development. Now, entering a new era, we have to adapt to the era of scientific management akin to the Gilbreth's approach, accepting the shift from high growth and high profits to low growth and low profits, from inflation to deflation, and that's not easy. Therefore, it requires very precise decision-making and a very long process of psychological and policy transformation. So, in fact, a famous economist once said that what China lacks is not productivity, but a market for ideas. If ideas could be more easily discussed and exchanged, then I believe that with China's vast market, so many outstanding entrepreneurs, excellent economists, and such a strong government, it is not impossible, nor without opportunity, for China's economic growth to return to its former trajectory. However, it indeed requires adopting a more relaxed posture, a more open mindset, and a more confident state. I think this is very important. So, how should we approach our consumption? For 20 years, Harvest has adhered to this. First, essential needs. Second, high quality. Third, people's livelihood. Fourth, infrastructure. Why did I choose this logic? Because from the macro to the meso level, I am now entering the meso part. Why did I choose this?
As you mentioned, investing in people's livelihood, essential needs, and high frequency is, in my view, a rather broad concept. Under this concept, considering the changes over the past few years, whether it's the pandemic or the post-pandemic period, and the alternation of the entire cycle. Do you have any specific changes in the subdivisions?
Yes, indeed, the macro environment is irresistible. Most of us earn tangible beta, and very few can earn alpha. However, during the rapid growth of the past 10 or 20 years, we mistakenly took beta as our own alpha. So we are relatively clear-headed, heavily focusing on Chinese consumption, domestic demand, and Chinese brands, primarily targeting essential needs, high frequency, and livelihood sectors. But we are also continuously and precisely optimizing our strategies, meaning that in the future, we will focus more on essential goods consumption. Within essential goods, we will emphasize high quality and low price, especially focusing on low price as the core of high quality, primarily creating products with the ultimate cost effectiveness in the mass consumer market. How do we explain this? Actually, it needs to align with the beta, the trend of the times. Insufficient purchasing power, inadequate effective demand, and a decrease in consumption propensity are becoming normalized, and these are the most important themes for the coming decades. So you will see in industries like food and beverages FMCG are strong, showing growth. Dongpeng Special Drink offers affordable and high-quality products. It has seen rapid revenue growth over 40–50% and net profit growth, excluding non-recurring items, over 70%, an impressive performance in a tough economy. I think a lot of it is actually the power bestowed by the beta of this era. So from this perspective, as investors and entrepreneurs, we need to study China's macroeconomy more to understand what is really happening with China's economic future. It is more important to resonate with the development environment of the times. If my starting point is wrong, the result will definitely not be perfect.
I feel these energy drinks all have a pretty nice flavor, right? They're all the same. So, for example, Dongpeng at that time, what made you think that a domestic brand would still have a chance in a very mature market?
Because we know that Red Bull is a franchise brand. And secondly, the functional beverage market in China is growing the fastest among China's markets. Thirdly, there is also a strong insight involved, because the number of people in flexible employment will increase, and groups with addiction need functional drinks, such as ride-sharing drivers and truck drivers. There will be more and more people like delivery couriers and food delivery riders. So there is still a strong consumer dynamic involved. We indeed made the right purchase. It was the beta of that era. And of course, it was also one of the best companies in China at that time. In 2017, when we invested in it, it was already the largest national brand company in China. Companies like this generally don't lack money. You've seen that all our products are not short of money, so it's difficult to engage in consumer business. For the companies you admire here, using money as a stepping stone is useless. So, besides money, what do we offer them? We really need to understand the industry, truly create value for them, genuinely generate profits, achieve strategic positioning, and help them with operational management.
Just like being their business partner. For example, in the case of Dongpeng, what have we done?
Strategic positioning is crucial. We had to expand beyond the Guangdong and Guangxi regions. When I invested, the company had not achieved significant sales. We discussed the Northern Expedition, advancing northward on. Now it's a national company with 12 production bases, selling well nationwide, especially in Central and South China. In East China, we have a significant presence, and outside of Guangdong province, we have already achieved nearly 60% of our sales. It takes a lot of courage to transform from a regional brand into a national brand, which is very challenging.
Especially in the beverage industry. In recent years, many internet concepts have emerged, quickly capturing the market. But once the bubble bursts, it might not last.
I feel that this industry is really competitive because there are many well-established multinational companies with mature brands. Their traditional distribution channels and even their offline vending machines are very solid.
The offline competition is particularly fierce. So how does Dongpeng address this issue? We have never been an internet sensation. Our platform has always been a traditional beverage company. However, Dongpeng excels in innovation. This is the true capability of empowering traditional consumer goods through digital transformation in the Chinese food and beverage industry. It's an enterprise that excels greatly. Like our digital marketing, our 5 codes in one and one item, one code. WeChat red envelopes in digital marketing across China drive sales and establish a deep distribution system, which many people are unaware of. Dongpeng's gross profit margin is only about 45 to 46%. Among the series of products we have invested in, it is not the one with the highest gross profit. Key is turnover rate as market acceptance matters. Repurchase willingness, like drinking more, is crucial. Public support Voting with choices and feet builds a China.
Like your company with a strong backing, I'm quite curious about Xiangqian, especially with heavy assets. During the pandemic, many catering businesses faced significant difficulties, but it seems their stores still managed to grow.
I think they have two aspects. First, the company restructured the production relationships to liberate productivity and encouraged everyone to start their own businesses. So they invest while also allowing more employees to participate in the company's operations, providing opportunities to many who start businesses with them, who understand such distribution. He has given this wealth to the teams that started businesses with him. In terms of small layoffs, they have done exceptionally well. This is also part of Wang Shuge's personal history over the past 10 years of development in Xiaotaiyuan. The biggest innovation they have made is what we call the innovation of production relations, which has restructured production relations and unleashed productivity. In terms of operational management, over the years, both parties have worked very hard towards modernization, standardization, and supply chain integration. In fact, in the range of 60 to 70, competition is quite fierce. They are actually the leaders in the 60 to 70 yuan range, with nearly 800 stores. We can anticipate that within 1 or 2 years they will surpass 1,000 stores. Secondly, they are a popular and convenient dining option. In the company's future development strategy outlined in the prospectus, we have positioned them as popular and convenient. We are not a high-end business. Wherever there are Chinese people, there is a little Taiwan.
Adhering to the strategy of covering a wide consumer market with popular categories to create an overwhelming development trend has always been the development strategy of Harvest Capital. In recent years, as the consumer markets in first and second tier cities have gradually become saturated, more and more brands are extending their reach to lower tier markets. County economies have become a major trend in driving consumption growth.
For many investors, in the office buildings of the CBD, we are actually quite far from that consumer group and their needs. So how do we...
It's about capturing the latest trends. So we also see this result. Why do most Go players, whether it's a complete defeat or not, mostly return unsuccessful? What is the reason? You say your understanding is incorrect. To observe China's economy and consumption, one should look at the development status of county economies with less than 500,000 people located more than 300 kilometers away from a provincial capital. Regarding the development of China's low to middle income groups, consumption is an industry that cannot grow rapidly. It has a long supply chain, so it won't experience explosive growth, but it withstands economic cycles, with 1.4 billion people backing it. We see a kind of confusion in Chinese consumption, easing the choice of the consumer industry for entrepreneurship. However, the failure rate in entrepreneurship is very high, and everything related to clothing, food, housing, and transportation in your life, especially in crowded cities, is considered consumption. Basically, they are all occupied by large branded companies.
So, in the future, besides the high-frequency, essential consumption projects you mentioned, what else do you think is possible?
The fields with new investment opportunities essentially still cater to household consumption. However, urban dwellers also have spiritual needs, right? So, spiritual needs represent a major track. And within this track, more and more good products and services will emerge. But I want to connect this with something. In terms of acquiring new customers, retention, conversion, and especially repeat purchases, it's about being able to consistently provide good products and services over the long term. Becoming a standard lifestyle choice for ordinary people is actually quite difficult and probably requires a long period of time. Let's have 2 small portions of old hen soup and then braised country chicken with edamame.
Your chicken soup is quite sweet. We often used to say, which Chinese company would become China's McDonald's or China's Starbucks?
But it seems that after so many years, such a company still hasn't emerged. It's extremely difficult. So what exactly has led to this result? It's the deep understanding of industrialization, standardization, and modernization. The food and beverage industry is a management-heavy field, but we in the East are latecomers in management science. The Americans, on the other hand, invented modern management science and supply chain science. Accounting science. So in terms of management, they are a step ahead. Even though it's a culinary desert, right? The largest McDonald's, KFC, and Starbucks in the world are not considered gourmet food, but it doesn't matter. They have become the largest global chain industries. They manage the matters related to interests very well. For example, it's very difficult for a catering company to go public, and for investors there are concerns about exit strategies or other subsequent options. Firstly, we're not too worried about the exit channels being blocked, because good companies inherently have very rich cash flow. The company's development is not an issue, and it does not have a capital thirst. Its own cyclical development is very stable. Secondly, I also believe that the current red-yellow light policy provides insights into consumption, and the policy will change soon, because consumption is the stabilizer and ballast of China's economy. Matters related to people's livelihood and consumption are all worth greatly encouraging in the future. However, there are some interim policies, and due to limited market scale, capacity and resources, I think supporting technology is understandable, but such policies are unsustainable in the long run. Without a doubt, Harvest was focused on consumption from the very beginning, 17 years ago. At that time, why did China have the advantage of being the largest single market in the world? The scale advantage with 1.4 billion people is a massive market. So, I believe in what Charlie Munger said. In one's lifetime, one needs to find a structural competitive advantage. This way, it provided me with a long-term track as a candidate. If I then choose some outstanding entrepreneurs, and you invest your time and energy into it, you become a positive variable in the growth of the company, brand growth, and the release of company value. Instead of being a bystander, for example, in 2015, 2016, and 2017, with such a booming market, I wasn't tempted to invest in something else because I felt I could buy into so many great Chinese champions, and their growth was quite visible. Why should I look elsewhere? I think having determination is very important. If there aren't such good projects, then I'd rather just stay put, which is very difficult. Having this kind of determination is extremely challenging because there were times when we didn't invest a single penny for a year and a half. Such situations do occur. So now, in the entire venture capital industry, isn't it true that the rate of making investments is indeed very low? Without a doubt, many funds are focusing on post-investment management. Yes, I think the first half of venture capital is over. In the past, there was an abundance of capital and opportunities, with unicorns everywhere and constant thematic and value stories. You could raise funds just with a PowerPoint presentation, but that will never happen again in the future, because it will definitely return to the intrinsic value of the company. The growth of cash flow is the principle of sustainability. So from this perspective, venture capital has truly entered the stage of real industry, requiring us investors to truly understand industry, our operations, and management to earn those minimal profits.
We cannot oppose consumption and technology. Since the beginning of last year, Song Xiangqian has repeatedly emphasized in public that consumption and technology are not in a binary opposition.
In the current fervent wave of technology investment, he often points out that technology investment is overheated while consumption is too cold.
Amid the fluctuating market sentiment, he seems to consistently maintain his composure, adhering to the philosophy of long-termism and advocating the importance of patient capital.
Now we are very focused on the competition in technology. There was a saying that in China, we actually see very meticulous and intensive cultivation. But when it comes to the most breakthrough, top-of-the-pyramid technological innovations, it always seems like
it's not yet that vibrant.
Indeed, Our technology application market is very developed, and we have invested a lot of financial, material, and human resources to solve the bottleneck projects, promoting the industrialization of technology and the transformation of scientific and technological achievements up. However, things may not necessarily go as we wish. The gap between us and the world's developed economies and other OECD countries is very large. Why? It's not that we haven't invested heavily in education, it's just that we were a bit too hasty, a bit too fast, and the foundation is not solid. It's low level and unstable, with insufficient investment and a lack of patience. I think this kind of technological invention and progress is very long term and not very suitable for us Chinese. We are generally not very patient, so I emphasize patience, and capital should also emphasize patience in the progress of science and technology. Have we always been impatient, or is it just in recent years? I think we've always been somewhat impatient. Personally, I feel that if you observe all the scientific and technological advancements and the resolution of major social issues since the founding of our country, it's basically been about hoping to solve them through campaigns. We identify what we're lacking and immediately try to make up for it. Personally, I believe that when it comes to scientific and technological progress, this kind of attitude doesn't work well. It's a systematic project that spans 50 to 100 years, from basic education, preschool education, university education, to the invention of science and technology and the reform of the research system. It requires systematic planning and design that is passed down through generations. And these are century-long projects.
Recently, many people have been rediscussing the changes in each industry under the backdrop of artificial intelligence technology, particularly how it alters people's cultural consumption habits. What are your observations on this?
It's actually quite significant. The changes in end-user applications are indeed very substantial because technology truly empowers consumption and alters the consumer experience. Our own experience in China is with electronic payments. In this regard, our digital infrastructure, a payment system, is probably the most developed and convenient in the world. However, on the flip side, as someone in the finance industry, I can say that the access and management of China's financial sector, including what we refer to as here, financial security market value, are actually not as high as those abroad. Only when the above-ground economy is developed can the underground economy be suppressed, and only when financial security is advocated can financial development occur. More secure and more regulated. Only then can a country's economic development be observed and depicted. Technology supports consumption, and consumption provides application scenarios for technology. The timing of these two is complementary and mutually developing, empowering each other. We have seen this in various fields in China over the years. Technological advancements with some technological content, including product application spaces, without exception, have not yielded very good results. What is the reason? It's because capital intervened too early. Secondly, we lack patience. And thirdly, our pursuit and focus on technology and science itself. It will quickly be distorted by capital. Fourthly, most people do not have that much patience during the process. Scientific research requires a very methodical, very quiet, truly socially responsible, and highly focused industry. If it is excessively focused on or even hunted from the perspective of financial markets and capital, then it becomes distorted. Then most of our development efforts will end up being futile. Investment, in essence, is still about investing in people.
Whether it's the founder or understanding their consumer base, but people are extremely complex and changeable. So do you have any so-called methodology to get as close as possible to the true nature or complexity of a person?
Of course, there are patterns to this. You think there are three key factors, right? One is betting on the entrepreneur's learning ability, which I can still assess. Whether they are focused, attentive, and professional. I believe that focus and attention lead to professionalism. How to learn to shorten this learning curve and transform knowledge accumulation into reusable skills can be discovered and observed in our long-term collaborative work, and it can be quantified. Besides learning ability, their dedication to growth is very important. So, a person's ability to grow in character, is self-motivation, which is their self-drive. How is their skill level? People are initially judged by their appearance, but ultimately defined by their values. Therefore, I believe that the drive from values and perspectives is very important. Another aspect is the entrepreneurial spirit, where persistence, patience, and determination towards a task are actually quite crucial. What exactly is entrepreneurial spirit? I think the first thing is having patience. Not that. Achieving everything in one go and making quick money, I believe that slow is fast. Secondly, being willing to give what? The ability he possesses can inspire a group of people, so he must have a spirit of dedication, altruism, and helping others. His gains and contributions are definitely not proportional, because in our industry, you need to be a very good observer. These are very calm and rational, and you also need to be able to resonate with entrepreneurs. The ability to resonate on the same frequency and have empathy is very important. It requires a lot of feeling. It also requires very strong persuasive skills. In fact, this job is not easy to do.
Which group do you think has the greatest growth potential in future Chinese consumption? Everyone talks about an aging society, but it seems that there haven't been many projects specifically targeting the silver economy in recent years.
A person's consumption goes through different stages, so when you are young, roughly between 25 to 40 years old, it's the peak period of your life for consumption. You need to establish a family and have children, which is the golden moment of vigorous consumption in life. So, we will most likely focus on that. The economic impact of young people is, of course, based on a very large base, because by 2030, we will have 300 million elderly people over the age of 60. However, a large base does not mean that the market is very mature. As it seems, it has never really taken off, because from a global perspective, pension systems are most developed in the United States and Japan. Japan excels in informatization, productization, and service, so the pension system demands a higher level of industrialization. Currently, we can only meet some basic essential needs for elderly care, and the profit margin is not very large. After all, the elderly have exited the main consumer market. Moreover, since they rely on pensions or support from their children, if we analyze objectively and calmly, the total amount is large, the quality is relatively low, and the population is quite large. However, the frequency of consumption, the average transaction value, and repeat purchases are not particularly high. However, the structure of the elderly population has also changed. More and more younger people are aging, and these individuals are knowledgeable, capable, and have the financial means. As a result, their retirement needs are becoming increasingly industrialized. The declining birth rate among younger people, in turn, affects areas such as consumer investment. So at this time, you need to plan ahead. Therefore, positioning yourself for the changes in this industry over the next 20 years is crucial to staying at the forefront without faltering. The core remains the basic needs, because regardless of how people's ages change, as long as there are social obligations, well, people will need to eat and drink beverages, drink tea, drink water, wear clothes, and travel. These needs are what we refer to as from cradle to grave, and we need to care for everyone, as each person has their own life consumption pattern. That is, we need to pursue the parts with fewer changes and find those certain and unchanging aspects.
I remember a couple of years ago, there was a story about a factory assembly line worker. The things you think about can't be the same as before. You have to consider whether the competition and rivalry between major countries like China and the US might lead to you losing your job tomorrow, or the factory's supply chain being relocated abroad. In the face of such drastic changes, every ordinary person needs to understand and care about something bigger.
These societal events have brought history to a particular moment, and then grand trends become very important. Behind these grand narratives, what about individual destinies? Resisting fate is actually quite difficult. But I believe humanity can resist its fate. It's like saying, my fate is determined by me, not by heaven. We are a typical generation that refuses to accept defeat. That's why we venture into entrepreneurship and investment. No, I believe this is a crucial aspect for two types of enterprises. Besides patience, having that kind of decisiveness and courage is quite rare, and it scores very high. So I say, the era's beta affects most people, but for a few, it doesn't have much impact. There are still those who can become pioneers of the era, who can navigate through cycles and reach the shores of victory.